should we get this show on the road? Well, hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining. It's so great to see so many people here striving to learn more about tools and technology to support your organization. So thank you so much for being here today. We're all here because we recognize that fundraising has evolved significantly, and even more so over the last couple of years. Fundraising strategies and tactics are now being paired with new products and tools that are critical for us to all stay relevant and up to speed in this kind of ever-changing landscape that we're living in. And it's thanks to these data-driven tools that nonprofits and fundraisers alike are finding quick and easy ways to achieve their goals, whether it be from reaching more donors, developing personalized messaging, or even optimizing your fundraising strategies. These tools are here to assist you and your teams without having to invest a lot of additional time and resources. And, I mentioned the last 2 years, but with so many organizations dealing with the challenges that came out of the pandemic, the statistics predict that 79% of nonprofits expect to implement artificial intelligence technology in the next 3 years. In addition to that, 50% of companies that embrace AI will actually double their cash flow in the next 5 to 7 years. Those are huge numbers. So what does that tell us? It tells us that data-driven tech is here to stay. And we are all kind of learning about it together. And the goal of today's webinar is to show you how the right tools will actually enhance what you're already doing and what you're already good at, which is fundraising. So the great news for you all today is that the 3 organizations here, Fundraise Up, Windfall Data, and Fundraising Kit, have the right tools to help you take advantage of these opportunities, translate them into fundraising success, and really empower your teams to raise more for your cause. So I am very excited to introduce your panelists today. First, we have Sal Salpietro, Chief Partnership Officer at Fundraise Up. Fundraise Up is a technology company unlocking the world's generosity potential by optimizing the way people give. And today, Sal is going to be teaching us how data and AI personalization can actually help drive what your online donation form looks like, what information is asked of the donor, and how much to ask from a donor, even if they have never actually interacted with your organization before. We also have Sean Barrett, Manager of Business Development at Windfall Data. Windfall is an AI, machine learning, and people data company that gives fundraisers hard-to-find insights on ideal donors and prospects. And today, Sean will be talking to us about some of the challenges with data and how well screening powered by AI and machine learning actually helps fundraisers to gain a deeper understanding of their constituents to address these challenges and better prioritize, segment, and actually engage with them. And last but certainly not least, we have Bryna Dilman, Director of Growth at Fundraising Kit. Bryna has worked for over 15 years in a variety of leadership roles within the nonprofit sector, including Cystic Fibrosis Canada, Breast Cancer Foundation, and the MS Society. And she's excited to be working with Fundraising Kit, which is a data-driven toolkit that integrates with leading CRMs to help nonprofits raise more. Kit analyzes data within your CRM using AI and machine learning to predict who to reach out to, when to reach out, and how much to ask for your next appeal to make it the most likely for donors to give. And today, Bryna is going to be talking about why data-driven fundraising tools will help your nonprofit raise more and how to find kind of the treasures that are already living within your database. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sal to get us started.
All right, thank you, Meredith. All right, let's get it going. My name's Salvatore Salpietro, as everybody knows, Sal, and I'm with Fundraise Up. So as we discussed earlier, I won't go too much further into it, but we're based in Brooklyn, and we are a fundraising solution that is for enterprise or enterprising nonprofits that are looking to make a big impact and increase online digital giving. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a bit about here how predictive analytics work at a high level. I think there's often some misunderstanding about it and how it can increase fundraising metrics and your revenue. Even here at Fundraise Up, often our team, we'll just say, well, just let AI figure it out. It's not that easy, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So we'll cover exactly what is AI, machine learning. Those two get intertwined quite a bit. AI is a bit more of a attention getter, while machine learning is a bit more boring sounding. But what we're all actually doing is machine learning. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how it works in a broad concept, and then in a more applicable way, where and how it can be applied to a donation form. Next slide. So what is AI? Right? AI is obviously artificial intelligence, and a definition that I found that I liked was AI is a form of technology that can create intelligent systems that can simulate human intelligence. We're talking about C-3PO. We're talking about the robot in Lost in Space, Commander Data from Star Trek. So when we talk a lot about AI, it's a larger umbrella that covers a lot of things. Basically, AI wouldn't be possible without machine learning. Okay, so that's a part of it, which brings us to the next slide. Machine learning, right? This is the stuff that is a subfield of artificial intelligence, enables machines to learn from past data or experiences without being explicitly programmed to do so. So Facebook ads, your iPhone, when it figures out what time to send you notifications, Google thinking about what search results to deliver you, your Google Assistant. I have like 3 of them in my house. I'm always asking, hey, Google, to do something. That's machine learning. That is taking data, learning from historical data, and applying it going forward. So AI replicating human kind of behaviors. Machine learning is learning from past data without being programmed explicitly to do so. Next. So looking at using that definition, we're going to talk about machine learning, Fundraise Up ourselves and our marketing and our sales. We talk about artificial intelligence. We're not selling robots that look like humans. We are actually selling software that learns off of historical data. So in a simple way, you have data, it goes into a model. In that model, you inject an algorithm that defines your parameters, and then your outcome is a prediction. So for example, let's use the nonprofit scenario. The data is 500 people on an iPhone gave an average of $45. The algorithm will decide if that is good or bad. And then the prediction will be, hey, next time we see an iPhone donor, let's start asking them $45, right? Because we're looking at historical data and we know what they're going to do. Instead of saying, well, our ask array should be $25, $50, and $100. Maybe we say, let's start at 45 for the iPhone because we know historically what they did. So that's the simplified version of machine learning and how it works. On the next slide, we'll look at how it works in more complex structure, right? So we kind of covered what it looks like, what people think it looks like, and that's what all of the success managers and support team and salespeople here at Fundraise Up think. Oh, just put the data in, and we're going to get our answer. And then every single one of our analysts and data analysts, face palms hard and goes, "Oh man, that's a simple question with a lot of work behind it." And you'll see there, right? You have your data. You have selecting, sourcing, which channels it coming in from. With your data engineering, you're going to have to clean the data, normalize the data. That one donor on an iPhone that gave $5,000, but 99 gave, $45. How do you normalize and equal it out and not let the machine learning throw off your algorithm? And as you can see there, there's a lot of sub operations and pieces that go into the machine learning. So this is just really to give a high level of machine learning and what it actually is. You don't need to remember all of this for your day-to-day, but this is so you can conceptualize what's happening behind the scenes. Somebody just asked, I think, if this will be recorded. Yes. Next slide. Okay, so got it. Thanks for explaining. But how do we use that? What does that do? Right? What can I do with that? And even more specifically, and that's what I can speak most to here among this group of panelists, how do I do that in my donation form? Let's start there. So there are a few ways, right? And if you're doing it through Fundraise Up or some other data source that's going to generate an ask amount out of historical data and other things, you can use machine learning to predict the right amount to ask, right? You can use machine learning to decide when to ask for more. I love analogies, right? When you show up under the car dealer lot, if you're in a rush and you look like you may not have a lot of patience, the sales guy's going to act a little differently than if you come in with a big smile and wearing a super nice suit where you just, you had time to put yourself together. When do you ask for an upsell? When do you not? Different times and circumstances influence that. And then if you can, if the machine knows already, let's pre-compile some data. If I know you're in New Jersey, or if I know you're in New York or California or Puerto Rico, as some of us are on the call, just fill the form out, put Puerto Rico in there for me. Like, I don't need to, make you work harder. So we're going to go through a couple of those examples, and I'm on my strict 10 to 12 minute timer here. So next slide. Right, so predict how much to ask. So here's an example of one nonprofit, and they have their 25, 50, and 100 and so on amounts, right? That's not an AI-informed ask array. That is 5, 6, 3 people sat around a table and said, what should those numbers be? 25 to 1,000. Okay, good, let's go, right? That 25 is different in New York City as a baseline starting amount. That baseline is different in Nebraska or Montana, right? There's different household incomes, different giving trends. So those numbers are really a wild guess and not maximizing what you're able to do and engage with that donor on. It doesn't personalize the experience. It doesn't feel innately native to maybe who they are, what device they're on, how much they can spend, and so on. Or even at the demographic of a donor. If a nonprofit has a largely smaller amount and younger base that has less disposable income, you might want to change those amounts to something smaller in comparison to those demographics where they might have larger amounts. So you have to know your audience as well, but that can be resolved with machine learning often. Next slide. So this is an example. This is UNICEF using the Fundraise Up checkout. You see how those are weird amounts to ask for, right? 75, 100, 160, right? 300, like you won't really find those, but that's machine learning saying, hey, I know you're located in this city on this device at this time of day. You've looked at 14 pages of our website. I think I can probably get you at an amount that starts at 75 or higher based on historical data. So that's machine learning, looking at the past, looking at what matches up with you as a visitor, and then making recommendations. So obviously those amounts would be lower for somebody meeting a different set of criteria, or higher for somebody meeting a different set of criteria. So that's machine learning coming into play in your predictions of how much to ask. So that we're doing this on the front end, not knowing anything about the donor, just what Google Analytics sees and what we know about that nonprofit's history, while the other panelists here can look at historical data that you have already about a donor. So that'll be interesting, and you want to make sure you hear that. But we want to make sure we convert them, get them in the door with as much personalization as possible. Next. When to ask for more. So machine learning again. So we'll use this when we say, hey, instead of that $65 gift, do you want to go $25 or $20 a month instead? But machine learning tells us when or when not to make this ask. You might not want to risk a $500 gift and propose $150 a month because it ain't going to happen, right? Somebody says, I got my bonus now. I'm not going to have $500 liquid all the time. So that's another way, is using that machine learning to see what's that threshold of when donors will switch to monthly, or when you don't want to risk a larger gift. Next. And similarly, this is there's an equivalent of this on most donation forms that are out there. I suggest it's used. The cover transaction costs feature is what I'm specifically referring to there with the gold star, and that is what allows many nonprofits to recover the processing fees for a donation. Now in Fundraise Up's case, we know that over a certain amount, over let's say $700 or $1,000, pre-checking the box has a negative impact on revenue, right? It actually damages conversion more than the costs are offset. So in Fundraise Up, we will let AI decide when or when not to ask them to cover fees so as not to damage a larger gift by deterring a donor saying, I'm giving you $1,000. Why do you want $1,050 from me, right? Some donors will pass on that just by thinking it might be rude. So those are just 3 ways that machine learning can be applied in the fundraising space in your digital donation forms. I believe I'm at time, and I think I covered what I set out to do. Yeah, and the final one here is pre-filling out what you know if it already exists. So, like I said before, we know that somebody's in the US, we're going to choose the currency for them. If you know they're on an iPhone or they're on an Android device, show them Google Pay, don't show them Apple Pay. If they're on a different device, show them the proper payment methods. And I think the final screen on the next slide is the address. So again, some donation forms have this. If you can build it or you have it available, use it, right? There's a reason everything you buy online pre-fills the address for you because they know it results into higher revenue. Okay. And that's my part. Hopefully that gave some context on machine learning and the AI differences and where you might be able to find parallels to apply it into your own digital giving process.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks so much, Sal. That's so interesting and so helpful how it can kind of really support fundraisers. Sean, over to you.
Oh, I'm here. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Sal. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to kind of diving a little bit deeper into what do you do once you kind of captured that donor, right? You've gone through that process of using that donation form. Now you've got this donor in your system. How do you really drive more value from that donor specifically, right? So I'm going to kind of breeze through this as we kind of already gone over who I am, what I do. But I think something that's really, really important to notice is on the right-hand side there, as a company, data is our bread and butter. We look at it every single day. So one of the things that we try to do is really try to understand what are some of these data-driven strategies that we can come up with for fundraisers, for development and advancement teams to really make sure that they're driving the most maximum value they can out of their first-party data that they're receiving from solutions like Fundraise Up. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to review with you guys today is a little bit about how to create a data-driven fundraising strategy and really how to leverage machine learning and AI within that process to make sure you're maximizing your ROI and driving, again, the most value you can from the donors you have within your systems of record. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, as a company, we kind of have this thesis that most organizations are not data-driven. Now, there obviously are organizations that have been able to buck this thesis, and this doesn't necessarily apply to. But what we have seen in the market today is that most organizations are not truly data-driven. And the reason for that is because first and foremost, most organizations have a sea of donors and prospect data that are in a bunch of different systems. So they could be in your central CRM, they could be in your volunteer database, your email database, direct mail database, whatever it may be. You have a sea of donors and prospects that are in disparate systems that affects your way to really recognize who is the right, let's say, Brad Stevens within each system. And even if this data is unified into a single a database or a single source of truth, even if this is unified, it's really hard to drive additional insights. And a lot of organizations do miss those kind of key insights into who these constituents and donors are, right? So they're not seeing wealth creation and they're not seeing wealth destruction events. And even then, if they are gaining some of those insights, a lot of organizations still make decisions based on gut or anecdotes. So an example of this is an organization will look historically at historical data and say, hey, this is the perfect donor for me based off of who's given to me in the past. And because of that, they create a donor profile saying, this is exactly who I need to go after, and aren't really basing that decision based off the data that they are getting. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And even more so, it's even harder to really recognize and reach the right individuals in today's day and age. Consumer insights are quickly shifting, as we saw with COVID, and now given the recent economic uncertainties of this day and age, it's really, really hard to understand, who is going to be wealthy or who is falling out of wealth. And with that, organizations are working with limited resources. So nonprofit organizations are always working with more and more limited resources. And if you're getting less donations through the door, then that's even putting a higher constraint on those resources. And because of that, it really makes it hard to break through the noise of who should I be spending my time with to make sure that I'm reaching my goals and hitting my KPIs. Next slide, please. So what we believe here at Windfall is that we've really established a 4-step process to really create a data-driven development program to ensure that you're hitting your goals and hitting those KPIs. So step 1 of this is establishing a foundation of trustworthy data. I'm going to go through these quickly, dive into them more obviously after this. So if it doesn't really make sense, just bear with me and you'll definitely get it after that. Step 2 is augmenting that trustworthy data with intelligence and insights. Step 3 is to take action on that data and really implement that across the entire organization. And the final step here, and definitely one of the most important, is to analyze what you have implemented and measure those results, and then iterate appropriately to make sure that you're capitalizing on your investments and driving further success. Next slide, please. So step 1, establish a foundation of trustworthy data. We can go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, a lot of organizations deal with a bunch of different sources or different areas of data. So it can be in your central CRM, volunteer, donation transactions like you get from Fundraise Up, interactions on your social posts, etc. There is data that lives everywhere and across multiple different systems. And because of that, a lot of the times it's very hard to understand who is the right person and who really is, let's say, this Brad Stevens. So is this Brad Stevens that came to my volunteering event and volunteered for this event the same Brad Stevens I have within my central CRM database? Well, I'm not exactly sure because I don't have all the information I have on that person within my CRM in my volunteer data set. And because of this, it can drive a lot of competing information and competing data across these different systems, and data integrity really degrades as you continue to drive more and more systems of record. We can go into the next slide. And even more so for organizations that have multiple locations, or as you continue to scale up as a nonprofit and you have multiple locations yourself, the data that you're receiving from all these different locations continues to complement and actually contribute to that data degradation, because there's more competition of the data that you're receiving from all of these different locations. And because of that, it becomes really hard to create a full 360 view of who your donors are. Again, is this Brad Stevens that is at location 3 the same Brad Stevens that we have within our central CRM at the national level or at the organizational level? If we can go to the next slide, please. So how do you solve for all that, right? Well, first and foremost, you have to unify the data that you have. So as you can see on the left-hand side over here, there are multiple different sources of data that we are getting every single day as an organization. And in order to really take action on that data and to be able to provide value from that data, you have to unify that data with a solution that uses really, really advanced machine learning as well as AI technology to be able to match the correct Dan Stevens to the right Dan Stevens and other data sources. So by leveraging machine learning and AI, you're able to say, hey, this Dan Stevens that is within our donor CRM database is actually the same Dan Stevens that is in our volunteer database. And through doing so, you can unify them into a single donor ID, which then enables you to enrich that donor and actually gain additional valuable insights to who that donor is, so that you can take action on them through your major gift programs, through your direct outreach, through using propensity modelings, et cetera. And through that unification process, you're able to have a much better 360-degree view of who your donors are. All right, next slide, please. So I talked about the enrichment process and really, gaining value and gaining deeper insights onto who your donors are. So one of the things that we like to do here, if we can go to the next slide, is really ask our clients a few questions, right? We ask a few clients of who is their donors currently? What are you looking at as a holistic view of who your donor is currently? Are you looking at their experiences? Are you looking at their engagement? Are you looking at their wealth? Are you looking at their likelihood to give? Are you looking at all these things to make sure that you're gaining a full understanding of who your donors are? And another thing that we really like to do as well is, what have you done in the past to drive results in the future, right? Have you penetrated certain cohorts of donors? So people that live within specific zip codes or may, have given at certain times of the year, et cetera. And then another thing as well is, what are your realistic donation thresholds? Obviously, everyone wants to have that donor that can give $100,000 in a major gift, but really the maximum donation that you're getting is $10,000, right? So what are those realistic thresholds that you can actually achieve? And then setting up a program and setting up a workflow and setting up your data to support that and make sure that you're getting as many of those $10,000 donations as possible. Next slide, please. So how do you go about doing that, right? How do you go about setting up those processes? How do you go about enabling and answering those questions? Really, the answer to this is that you have to augment this with frequent well screening that can match to your entire database, leveraging advanced machine learning and AI to continually drive high accuracy and high value wealth, as well as demographic information, so that you can really segment your donors to better identify, understand, and engage with them. In doing so, and through leveraging a solution that employs machine learning algorithms and has fresh, up-to-date information, you're able to drive a high level of accuracy in understanding who your donors are so that you can spend more time with the correct donor. We can go to the next slide here. So for example, some of the insights that you can drive after implementing a solution like this, after screening your entire database and seeing exactly who all your donors are, is really getting an understanding of, well, how am I doing across my entire donor base? So on the left-hand side here, what you can see is you can create analyses around, well, how much is the average donation that I'm getting across certain net worth buckets? And even though this graph on the right is trending up and to the right, what you can see is that around the $2.5 to $5 million donation bucket, that the average donation is around the same. So that really presents an opportunity for you to spend more time within that specific cohort of donors to increase those donations to obviously have a higher average for that specific net worth bucket. And even if the left-hand side here looks good, you're trending up and to the right, you're getting higher average donations as you are getting more affluent. If you look at the right side of the graph here, what is your penetration within these specific net worth buckets? And is there potential buckets that you can spend more time with to get more donations through the door? So as you can see, that 20 million plus is at 38.6% penetration. So your average donation is much higher with those individuals, but you have a low penetration of actually gaining donations from all those people that fall within that specific range. So maybe you spend more time with that cohort and see if you can get more donations from them, because they tend to donate at a higher level. If we can go to the next slide. So after you've gained all of this information, you've gotten this really deep intelligence and deep understanding of who your donors are, how do you implement that as an organization, and how do you ensure that you take action as an entire organization to really materialize and utilize this data in your everyday workflows? If we can go to the next slide, please. First and foremost, you have to roll out an implementation strategy for the data that you are receiving. So you have to build consensus within the organization itself first, right? If the organization does not trust and does not believe in the data that you are getting, it becomes very, very hard for you to implement that information and implement those into workflows across the entire organization as well. The second thing there is establishing trust, right? So whether that's through doing internal evaluation or just doing pure prospect research to validate the data that you're receiving is correct, it's really important as an organization to establish trust in that information so that you can start implementing those into your programs to drive more automation and orchestrate enhancements, right? So without that trust and without that consensus and the information that you're receiving from the screening that you're doing or other third-party vendors that you receive data from, it'll become impossible to automate more programs and more processes and workflows down the line to really become a truly data-driven organization. Next slide, please. So once you've done this entire implementation and you're starting to utilize this data across the entire organization, really what's important is to analyze, measure those results and iterate. Setting those KPIs and really having an understanding of what your success metrics are extremely important moving forward for your organization. Next slide. So how do you do that, right? So how do you really kind of set up this workflow to analyze and iterate? First and foremost is continually look at your technology, right? So continue to monitor your data flows. Where is your data coming from? Is that adding more statistical value to the machine learning and AI solutions that you're employing? The second thing there is to identify and address any data unification issues. Like I mentioned earlier, you have donors that are existing in multiple different systems of record. It's really important to unify that so you can drive value from that data that you have. and then improve predictive modeling efforts with accurate data. So all net worth information is obviously a modeled attribute. So it's extremely important to have accurate and up-to-date information and data from not only yourselves, but also your third-party data vendor to ensure that the data that you're getting out has a high level of efficiency and a high level of accuracy. The next thing is the process, right? Sorry, I'm going through this a little bit more, sorry. The next thing is process. So you have to expand those workflows to take advantage of those new data, refine those KPIs as you continue to get more data in. And then the last thing there is the people. You have to have really, really good engagement amongst your organization. If you're not talking to each other, if you're not talking about what's working and what's not working across this entire flow, the entire process will break down and you will not be able to drive significant ROI from your investment. Now we go to the next slide here. So another way to do this is to visualize your KPIs and your success metrics. Constituent data is changing over time, as well as your particular KPIs and what goals you have. And because of that, it's really important, again, to have that fresh data that continues to implement into your workflows so that you can build out reports to understand exactly what is working and what is not working, and be able to visualize that across the entire organization. Having a great way to see exactly what programs are working, what strategies are working, and what data is working for you and what data is not working for you can really help you better understand and find new ways to engage with donors through continued evaluation. Next slide. So as key takeaways here, and I think I'm running up against time as well, we can go to the next slide. As a checklist, first and foremost, screen your entire database. Make sure that you're uncovering every single possible donor that could be a great potential donor for your organization. And in doing so, you can use these triggers and use these different demographic informations to segment those donors to drive different cohorts. God, that's a tongue twister for me. I can't say that one today. In order to engage with them better. And then also determine your organization's goals, set up those success metrics. What are your KPIs? Evaluate how you're doing against those as you continue to implement this data into your workflows, and then iterate on that to make sure that you're keeping up with the changes that are happening, not only at the organizational level, but also at the constituent level. And I think that is all I had. Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. That was great. We'll throw it over to Bryna.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Honestly, those were two incredible presentations with a lot of information and data to help everybody on this call with their next steps. So I'm in awe to be on the panel with such incredible leaders. So thank you. Next slide. Just a little bit about me. Again, the Director of Growth at Fundraising Kit. I have a lot of nonprofit experience. So all of you on the call, I know exactly what you're going through, and I can relate to you on a very deep level. But just a little bit about Fundraising Kit. We are based in Vancouver, BC, but we service nonprofits across North America, Australia, and really our data-driven toolkit helps nonprofits raise more. And we plug into customer relationship management platforms, so Salesforce, Neo1, Blackbaud, and our machine learning and AI technology provides insights and tells your nonprofit what donors are ready to give. Our tools help you segment donors for targeted communications and helps you track fundraising progress, all while saving time and resources in the quest to raise funds. So next slide, please. So why are data-driven tools necessary, right? That's why we're all here on this call. So next slide. Really, it's the opportunity to bridge the gap between people and technology. And as you heard, both Sal and Sean have done an excellent job about communicating a ton of data and information and about AI and technology. Technology is your friend, and it can be used to make a real difference. We already connect online outside of our community. We use technology. We bank online. We eat online. We shop online. But most importantly, we donate online. And we want to think about how technology and your nonprofit staff and your fundraisers can work together, and how this diversity really will drive better performance of teams. And we all have seen it, especially over the last 2 years. Technology is advancing quickly, and organizations need to bridge that gap between it and people. And there's no better time for leaders, again, like all of you on this call, to really start to consider this today. And it's really that art and science of fundraising through technology. So next slide really is just telling us, why and how we should be using all of these different technologies. We see that online revenue has increased by 60% in the last couple of years. And actually last year, online fundraising grew by an additional 12.1%. And while we know donors still receive direct mail and donate via check, many donors have moved online. In fact, 47% of donors over the age of 60 give online. So what does this really mean? Your nonprofit should have way more data and names in your database. Another great slide is in 2021, 25% of online donations came from mobile devices. So we're really seeing a lot more nonprofits optimizing their web pages, donation pages, and fundraising emails to be mobile accessible, ensuring that you're meeting people where they're at. And third, really, despite being a year removed from the beginning of the pandemic, 85% of events are still virtual. And I think it really just shows how comfortable we are all at now participating and giving with our favorite organizations from home. So what does all this mean? It really means that you have way more data in your database. So what are you going to do with it? And thanks to data-driven technologies, nonprofit organizations and fundraisers are finding quick, easy, and seamless and affordable ways to reach more donors, to personalize messaging, optimize your fundraising strategies, and automate these fundraising tasks that we all know would take a lot of hours and resources to perform. Okay, so now that you've seen all the data that we've, told you that is happening out there and how we're collecting all this information, what's the next step? So next slide. There's an opportunity. Let's talk about why you're here. Data-driven technologies to increase fundraising revenue. And that can start with using your database. All of this data is now in there, and you need to start identifying the opportunities that you have within your database. And one opportunity that we see is going to change how your organization is going to increase revenue is looking at who can be a major donor. So why do major donors matter? Well, if you look at this slide, 88% of nonprofit funding comes from only 12% of donors. And 68% of nonprofits are often have a dedicated full-time major gift fundraiser. Nonprofits really rely heavily, and please light up the chat, let me know if I'm right or wrong, but this is what I've seen in my experience. But nonprofits rely heavily on their major donors, and some organizations receive as much as 95% of their funding from only 5% of their donors. The general rule is that we should be spending 80% of our time on 20% of our donors, right? Thank you for communicating on the chat. It's true. And as such, major donor engagement needs to be constantly analyzed so you can find the perfect time to make your next appeal. Especially we see during the tax season when most impactful contributions will come from your major donors. So you want to find the right time to reach out. One factor to consider is really knowing when your donors have your organization top of mind. So what you need to know is all in your database. And you want to know what donors are sitting, waiting to be communicated with, to be stewarded, to be supported, and to be asked to become that next major donor. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we know that. How do we use data-driven techniques to identify these potential major donors? So next slide. Again, a lot of what Sean and Sal have been saying in regards to using your information and wealth indicators, but the best practices for identifying major donors and what you need to do with them is all in your database. Number one, you need to look at specific indicators, and not just indicators that are in there, but indicators that are in there because your donors are telling you them. Their giving history, how often do they give? How recently did they give? How much did they give? Are you seeing any incremental patterns in their giving? What campaigns and programs did they give to? So you really want to look at your donor actions, as that's going to help you determine their capacity to give. And based on that data, you can decide who in your database is a major donor prospect, how much you should ask for when you're asking for that major gift. And what really is going to help elevate that to the next level is data-driven tools. obviously, like Fundraising Kit, what we do is aggregate all that information. So we give you a donor score out of 100. Out of all your donors, every single donor gets a score and lets you know who is most likely to become a major donor based on all the information and more that I just mentioned. And this really is going to help you. And again, I know all of you, and I know the position you're in. It takes a lot of time and energy to pull just a general list. It's going to help you save time and energy so you don't waste resources. Not necessarily just pulling everyone in your database that you want to become a major donor, but it's going to prevent you from cultivating donors who are really unlikely or unable to give that gift that you want. You want to use the data-driven tools at your accessibility that will tell you who is ready to become that major donor. So having the right data-driven tools to help you qualify these contacts. So who is ready to become a major donor? How much should you even ask them? When should you reach out? How should you reach out? Based on all the interactions in which they are taking with your organization, opening emails, giving to you, how they're giving, wealth indicators, all of that stuff can help you create donor profiles so you know who you can connect with and build relationships so you connect with the right people that are going to be your next major donor. So next slide. So I want to give you a scenario of a nonprofit organization that needed to do this. Specifically message, TV was looking to find data-driven techniques within their database to raise more money. And they used Fundraising Kit to do this. What did they do? During the pandemic, I'm sure lots of you can relate to this. They had challenges with their individual giving campaigns for a variety of different reasons that I'm sure can all let me know in the chat. But what did they need to do? They wanted to focus on identifying a few major donors within their database, not looking for new people, but within their database who could make contributions. And they focused on attracting monthly recurring donations as well. The results you can see in front of you were incredible. A year over year, 108% increase in total gifts received, 260% increase in their number of recurring donors, and an increase in their annual fundraising revenue by 56%. The team's decision to be data-driven in their fundraising approach helped them stay afloat during an economic crisis. But more importantly, it created a viable revenue channel for the organization. And post when we send this out, we can send you a link to their case study that's on our website that will give you a bit more information of how and why they do this. Next slide. So really, I want this, really my goal today was to show you how and why data-driven techniques can help your nonprofit raise more and give you some real life nonprofit examples of why and how the right tools, again, everyone on this call, all the panelists and leaders, how these right tools can help your nonprofit enhance and not replace what you're already good at, which is fundraising. And how does Fundraising Kit do that? Again, we're a data-driven toolkit that helps nonprofits raise more for their cause by literally plugging into your database. Our tools and AI and machine learning let us understand who your donors are, what they're doing, how they're interacting with your organization, and gives you a score out of 100 to tell you which donor is the most likely to become your next major donor, who's the most likely to give a monthly giving. It's really important that you understand who your donors are by listening to what they say and having the ability to have a technology and a data-driven strategy to be able to help your staff focus on the right people. And I've been in that nonprofit industry for so long. We know that these nonprofits and our staff are overwhelmed, and we hire them for their skill set and their donor relationship management skills. Getting them into the tools and downloading all these spreadsheets that they have no idea what to do with is really going to help your company save time, energy, and resources. And that's it for me for right now. Excellent.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all. That was super eye-opening. And I know I learned a lot, so I'm sure everyone on the call did as well. Like Bryna, I've worked in the nonprofit space for quite a while, and I always think about, how much of my sanity could have been saved with tools like these, and how I could have, started actioning strategies right away. So thank you all. We have a few questions that have come in for our panelists. So the first question is for Bryna. So we've heard that personalization is a big trend that will help further drive revenue. With mixed feelings about big data and sentiment towards predictive algorithms showing us ads for things that we maybe only thought about, is there a limit to how personalized things can be, and where should that line be drawn?
Great question. I could talk for hours about personalization, but I would say personalization goes hand in hand with really understanding who your donors are. It's much more than just personalizing a name in an email or thanking them for the amount they gave. Your donors want to feel seen and appreciated. They're just not another file or number in your database. So tracking those conversations around why they give to you, how, when, and how they prefer to give is important, not only to show that you're listening, but that you value them and that you support how they want to be communicated with. Often, we see nonprofits guessing on when and how much to ask from donors. And that's where AI and technology can really come into play. By tracking that information in your database, it can help you understand how best personalized an approach to be to a donor. And it not only makes your life easier as a fundraiser, but it increases the likelihood that that donor will actually give.
Great, thanks, Bryna. The second question is for Sean. So what information do companies use to target segments of existing and potential donors? And how do we know if our CRM is capable of pulling this kind of data?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it really kind of depends on organization to organization. But to answer the second part of that, does your CRM already have the information in there? And the answer to that is yes. The great thing about leveraging tools across the board, like we have here on the call today, is that we can operate with very, very little information, and we are able to return very high value information back to you with that. For example, Fundraise Up, you don't even need to know who your donors are. They already know who they are as they navigate around the web and are able to pull that information in and give you a more educated understanding of what that ask should be as they go to that form, right? For us, we need very, very basic information: first name, last name, home address, et cetera. And we're able to return a plethora of additional information and demographic information about that constituent to you. And then, like Bryna said, they take exactly all that information from your database and are able to provide these predictive scores back to you on who's the best person to reach out to. So the good news is we can operate off of very, very little information, almost no information at all in some cases. And to answer your question, that data is already existing in your database today. Yes, that data is already in your CRM. It is there, and it is ready to be used, and is ready to have value driven from it. So I'd say, reach out to one or any of us, and we'd be happy to dive deeper on that, because we can go on about for hours on that subject. But it is there, and it is ready to be used.
Amazing. Thanks, Sean. And then we have a question for Sal. So with all the costs associated with new technology for the nonprofit sector, how do nonprofits justify this budget line? Considering some nonprofits over the last 2 years are raising lower than projected, have fewer staff, and are focusing on more ways to raise money, how do they justify the expense of added tech tools?
Wow, way to cram every problem of a nonprofit in the modern day into one question.
It was a mouthful, eh?
No money, no people, nothing. So let's start with the no money first. Obviously, you want to, when possible, do some value proposition analysis there. If you can do performance aligned paying, like with Google ads and so on, when you're doing that, pay for what happens, not pay for something that hasn't happened yet. Do that. I want to kind of hone in on the fewer staff and still trying to raise more money. And I worked at nonprofit as well as a director of digital marketing at a national nonprofit. And I came from the for-profit world. So I was bringing this, look at the ROI, look at hours saved, look at automation, look at what we're getting from the tech. And what I think a lot of nonprofits fail to do is they just kind of look at the, oh, this is going to cost me $5,000, and that's it. Where do we get $5,000? $5,000. And you have to think, well, what's the automation of that? What's the time spent? And is an hour of time of someone on our staff worth $50? This is going to save us 10 hours a month, and extrapolate that. And you have to kind of dig a little deeper and look at not the direct correlation always, because if your fundraising developer is spending 10 hours to clean a CSV and do reach outs and do other things with data, they're not having that time to do reach out to donors and do things that are more impactful. So the way to justify that, I think, is to look at automation where possible, look at what can save time, and then look at where that time can be better spent in more impactful ways to raise that. So if you have software taking care of your digital, right, or you're using some of the data tools here to take care of the research, you don't have to do research. You could focus on making phone calls to the $5,000 donor. You don't have to worry about, I got to optimize this for those $510 donations. Let tech take care of that and let the humans do the human part. I think that is how I would kind of wrap it up, if that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. So, being mindful of time, I have one more question that I think I'm going to pose to all of you, and you all have about a minute to answer it. But you've all done such a great job of explaining and showing how valuable these tools are and how they can help nonprofits raise more money. But venturing into this world for the first time can be really intimidating. So how do you recommend that nonprofits that want to start implementing these tools, how do they even get started? Maybe Sean, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, I think it's important to understand what your goals are as an organization. Where do you want to be for the rest of this year and going into next year? And from that back into what is going to be the technology, what is going to be that automation that'll help you get there. I think one or all of our solutions today will help you do that, but it's that goal setting, understanding what your KPIs are, and really understanding where you need to be as an organization in the future to help you prioritize who you're going to reach out to first and the tools that you're going to evaluate in order to get yourself there.
Amazing. Great answer. Sal.
It's a bigger conversation, and I think than I can put into a couple sentences.
Definitely.
So I think Sean covered the parts that I would probably say. I'd love, I'll be at Bridge conference. If anybody here is going to be at Bridge, we can wax more on that topic.
Amazing. And then Bryna.
Do your research, internally determine, what are you looking to achieve? What are you hoping to gain? What are your opportunities? Look at where you're at and figure out where you want to go. Again, there's a lot of opportunity to pool together those different departments in the nonprofit sector and understand where each one of you want to go, and pool together your budgets and look at how together you can utilize technology like the three of ours, so that it's not just the marketing budget or just the fundraising budget. You really want to ensure that every single thing that your nonprofit does is for the benefit of your nonprofit, not necessarily the department. And so I would say, obviously, check out fundraisingkit.com, connect with me, Bryna Dilman, on LinkedIn, and I'd be more than happy to help connect with you and chat with you about what that next step is.
Okay, amazing. I mean, I know we could talk about this forever, but that does bring us to the end of the webinar. So for any questions that we weren't able to answer today, we will be in touch to answer those questions for you. And we will also be sending out a recording of the webinar to you all. So thank you to everybody that attended. Thank you to Sal and Sean and Bryna. Also a huge thanks to Taylor and Toby, who have been, instrumental in pulling all of this off today. I hope that you're all ready to go out and kind of explore more about how AI and machine learning can help you and your organization. So thank you again.